Hello, and how are you feeling? And welcome to episode 2 of Coaching from Not a Blue Tree with me, Gary Burns. This episode is all about coaching and hypnosis and how the two techniques complement each other. Hypnosis is about inducing the perfectly natural trance state, a state we routinely experience, so that we can talk directly with the unconscious mind, which is where all behaviour, all learning, and all change take place, so that we can embed positive, affirming messages which assist in achieving success. It's nothing more and nothing less. When considering the benefits and uses of hypnosis, it's important to first understand how the human mind works. And for the purposes of this podcast, and indeed for the purposes of how I work, the mind is split into two parts, the conscious and the unconscious minds. The conscious mind is where we do our logical thinking, our rational thinking, and the conscious mind has limited capacity, generally described as being able to process 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. In other words, we can handle anything from 5 to 9 pieces of information in our conscious mind before we start to feel overloaded or overwhelmed. It's one of the reasons that when we learn a new skill, it initially feels very challenging and, for want of a better word, clunky. If you're a driver, think back to learning to drive and how complicated it felt, with actions for each foot and hand, different places to look and tasks to remember. And think about driving now, a seemingly automatic process. And that automatic process shows the power of the unconscious mind, which can store and process something like 500,000 chunks of information. Indeed, the discussion continues as to how much the unconscious mind can actually store and handle before it reaches capacity, whatever that may look or feel like. The power of the unconscious mind is, though, remarkable. The unconscious mind stores all memories and organises them. It may be a struggle, but it is all in there somewhere, and how often are we surprised by what we've remembered? Now, as I said earlier, there is some debate as to how much is literally remembered and stored. I do, though, think that it is generally agreed that we store more than we believe we do, which is the reason that we can recover memories which surprise us. How many times over the years have you found yourself being reminded of something and thinking or saying that you'd forgotten all about it? Or wanting to remember something, a memory that seems lost, which suddenly comes to you, perhaps at the most unexpected moment. Some things will be stored close to the surface, details and knowledge which we need to access with ease and possibly on a regular basis, whereas other stuff will be stored more deeply and may take us longer to recall. Just take a moment to think about your mobile number or your address and notice how quickly you can consciously remember them. Whereas if you think about your first day at school, for example, it may take a little longer. Similarly, there will be processes that you do automatically because you do them all the time, whereas other processes may require some conscious thought to refresh your memory. The unconscious mind is the domain of the emotions. Emotions come from the unconscious. Just think about the times that you suddenly find yourself smiling. You didn't decide to smile. It was a response from your unconscious mind to what was happening around you. We can, of course, make the conscious decision to experience any emotion. However, the experiences which give us the skills to show the emotion are stored in the unconscious mind, and test this out. Just think about a time when you really laughed out loud. Bring the memory to mind and notice how the emotion comes seemingly from nowhere. You may be laughing now, or at least smiling. The unconscious mind represses memories with unresolved negative emotions. It may keep those memories repressed to protect us, and equally, when we're ready, may present them for resolution. Now, these are 3 really powerful domains of the unconscious mind. It explains why at times we cannot recall the bad stuff that has happened. Indeed, we may have absolutely no memory at all of the event. Yet, when the time is right, the memory comes to the surface. And this is the unconscious mind recognizing that you are ready to deal with the issue. Or it may not, and keep the memory hidden forever. One interesting aspect of NLP, which I'll be talking about in episode 3, is that many of the techniques ask us to access memories without having to say what the memory is, which of course raises the question of whether you're accessing a real memory or whether the unconscious mind is simply presenting something which allows you to address the issue without accessing what may be a cripplingly painful memory. And the reality is that it doesn't matter. The unconscious mind presents what's necessary to address the issue. The unconscious mind knows this and allows the real issue to be resolved. And a word of caution here. Memories may or may not be real. They are, of course, all in our head. They could be real, they could be distorted, and they could be altered by other filters. Accept them for what they are and work with them. The unconscious mind runs and preserves the body. Hence, we are able to breathe, regulate our body temperature, digest our food, and so on without having to think about it. We automatically pull our hand away if we touch something very hot or very cold, and the fight or flight instinct is hardwired into us. And at times when using hypnosis, it pays to remind the unconscious mind that this is what it does. And it's amazing how the unconscious mind can manage and regulate so much. The unconscious mind is a highly moral being. Now, this is not some innate understanding of right and wrong. It is, of course, learned behaviour, acquired from those around us, our experiences, our model of the world. It knows right from wrong according to what we've learned, which is the reason that we at times have to consciously convince ourselves that we're doing right for all sorts of spurious reasons, when deep down we know that we're doing wrong. It's the reason that some people are okay being dishonest or hurting others. Morally, they're doing what they think is okay. The unconscious mind enjoys serving and needs clear orders to follow. It's one of the reasons that all instructions need to be clear and to the point. The unconscious mind will respond far better to this approach. It's one of the reasons that hypnosis is so effective. When you're in trance, it's easier to give direct, positive messages which the unconscious mind accepts without the conscious mind getting in the way. It's also something to think about when writing instructions or explaining to someone how to do something. Keep it short, to the point, and in language which is unambiguous. The unconscious mind controls and maintains all perceptions. It maintains instincts, that sixth sense, that ringing alarm bell, and generates habits. It does, though, need repetition for a habit to be installed. It's also programmed to seek more and more, so it is no wonder we can feel frustrated when we're stuck in a rut. The unconscious mind wants more, which is not happening. These are important domains. Learning to listen to that sixth sense, the sense that something is not right, is really important. Our unconscious mind will have noticed something that consciously we're not aware of. After all, the unconscious mind processes so much more. And we all know that some habits can take time to install. It's possible to learn first time and get it right. Most of us, though, need a little longer. And as for needing more, we're just not hardwired to settle. Yet so many of us do. The unconscious mind stores, generates and transmits energy, and this is very literal. When we need energy, our body delivers. It decides where and how to get the energy and distributes it to where it's needed. The unconscious mind functions best as a whole integrated unit, as this allows everything to flow freely throughout the unconscious mind. It's one of the reasons for working with incongruency in behaviour and thought, as it can and does disrupt success. The unconscious mind is highly symbolic and takes everything personally. It's also lazy, as it works on the principle of least effort, so make sure you keep it simple. It's one of the reasons that our dreams can be so strange. It's also the reason that when you wish you were richer, you're more likely to spot a pound coin on the floor. Pick it up, you're richer, and your unconscious mind ticks it off as done. And finally, the unconscious mind does not process negatives particularly well. If I tell you, whatever you do, don't think of a blue tree, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Tell your child not to spill something, and what do? Next time, tell them to hold the cup carefully or to walk slowly. Notice the difference. This is all well and good, but how does it help us understand the benefits of hypnosis? To embed learning, to change behaviour and patterns of behaviour, to reprogram unwanted and unhelpful thinking. We want to talk with, communicate with the unconscious mind, which, as I said earlier, is where all learning, all behaviour and all change takes place. Further to this, by communicating directly with the unconscious mind, we can access all the processes which take place on an unconscious level, which means that we can alter and amend those processes, those behaviours. embedding learning which allows change to take place where it is most effective, that is to say, on an unconscious level. By engaging directly with those learned processes that are now unwanted but firmly embedded, those automatic processes, those established ways of thinking and doing, we can influence and communicate in a way to be able to change them. And hypnosis allows us to bypass the conscious mind with all of its logical and rational thinking and its very limited capacity, and work directly with the huge power of the unconscious mind. The hypnotic state, the state of trance, is perfectly normal and natural. It's the state we experience in those few moments between sleeping and being awake, that almost dream-like state. It's the state we enter when totally transfixed by something. Indeed, 19th century surgeon James Braid, reviving the work of Frank Mesmer, initially used the term monoideism, being focused on a single idea. And you may have experienced this state when in the cinema, at times when there is complete silence, the audience transfixed, entirely focused on the screen. No movement, no sound, just single focus on the screen. It's the state we experience when we're driving and suddenly wonder where the last 20 miles have gone. It is a state in which we retain absolute control. And this is one of the common misconceptions around hypnosis, that once you're in trance you lose control and you're under the control of the hypnotist. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you are in trance, whether it's a naturally occurring state or induced by following the instructions of the hypnotist, you remain in absolute control of what you choose to do and not to do. And you may well have seen stage hypnosis where people seemingly surrender to the hypnotist and act out the most bizarre behaviour. It's a great illusion, which, having observed and been part of, I know is great fun. The reality is those taking part are doing so through choice, wanting to take part in the illusion and consciously allowing themselves to take part. The illusion for those in trance temporarily becomes real, yet they remain fully in control, which is the reason they will do what the hypnotist tells them. However, if the hypnotist told them, for example, to rob a bank or take their clothes off, the chances are those in trance are more than likely not to follow those instructions. The hypnotic state is, of course, a different state, and research shows actual changes to our brainwaves and brain activity. Our brainwaves in a conscious state vary from gamma waves, a sign of high concentration, through beta waves when we're active and with an external focus of attention, to alpha waves, a sign of being very relaxed with passive attention, to theta waves, when we are deeply relaxed and focusing inwardly, and then finally delta waves, a sign we're asleep. And following on from this, in the deeply relaxed theta wave state, the brain shows greater activity in the areas which deal with processing and controlling what's going on in our bodies, whereas the part of the brain that deals with actions and awareness of those actions seems to be disconnected, or at least significantly less active. The hypnotic state is therefore real and measurable, and the skill of the hypnotist is getting the client into that deeply relaxed state. So how do we get into that trance state? You may well have heard people talking about hypnotic induction, a process which moves people from their conscious awake state into a relaxed hypnotic state. And there are multiple ways of achieving this, from brief, rapid induction processes to progressive, longer induction techniques. The aim in all the various inductions is, though, the same. You want the person to move into that hypnotic state, and the deeper the better for change work. And be clear, you don't need a hypnotist to enter a hypnotic state. You can self-direct, you can practice meditation, you can undertake mindfulness, you can engage in things like yoga, all taking you from the conscious state into the trance state. Indeed, there are apps to assist you with guided meditations and mindfulness exercises. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes. However, while you can enter the hypnotic trance state, something you can do on your own, the hypnotist does considerably more. To get the most from the process, the hypnotist aims to embed positive, affirmative messages which assist in the change process. And while it's possible to deliver some generic constructive messages, the process is far more effective if the messaging is directly related to you as the client. For me, this means that first I need to understand the issue. I need to hear how you describe the unwanted and wanted behaviour. I need to listen to the language you use. I need to observe the emotions that the unwanted and wanted behaviours trigger in you. Only by doing all of this can I tailor the process to you, to your needs, to the changes you want to make, and how you define and experience those changes. And because I'm using your words, your language, your emotions as I embed those messages, the unconscious mind is far more accepting, recognizing the language, the words, the emotions as its own. And this, in turn, leads to more effective change. The question then is, how does this complement coaching? Well, you work with me, a coach, to effect change, setting goals, making plans in a well-formed way, as I discussed in episode 1. You establish what you want to achieve. We look at barriers to and the benefits of success. We look at routes to success. We do some work to address the barriers, looking at new strategies and completed targeted approaches to resolve some of the issues. You are motivated and moving forward. Hypnosis, at this point, can and does provide the means to reinforce progress, reinforce changing behaviour, reinforce new ways of thinking. Once you're in trance, and the deeper the better, as the hypnotist, I can use the language you've used, I can tap into the emotions that you've expressed, and I can include the words that you have spoken, effectively quoting, reflecting back at your unconscious mind what you indicated consciously to me. It turns the process into a powerful conversation with the unconscious mind, assisting and adding to the change process. And while hypnosis can be and is used to reinforce any change work, I find that it is a particularly useful tool when working with issues such as phobias, anxiety, and addiction. It can tap into those deep-seated beliefs and behaviours in a way which leads to greater change, resolving unwanted behaviour, and opening up new opportunities and choices. If you want to see how the process feels, visit my website, notabluetree.com, and check out the page on Hypnosis, where you'll find a demo track which lasts about 17 minutes. It is, of course, a demo, and it's very generic in nature. It does, though, give you a clear idea of what the process feels like, and do make sure you're sitting somewhere safe when you listen to the track. As you think about an exciting and compelling future, and as you take the first steps to get to where you want to be, just imagine how hypnosis can help as you learn more, change what's unwanted, and develop new behaviours. And you know that it makes sense, don't you?